Welcome to another edition of What's Art Got to Do with It? This is an ongoing series of conversations with creators and others about how art can inspire us to become more curious about our own lives and expand how we see the world around us. And tonight, I am joined by Tim Dillinger-Curenton and Ray Curenton-Dillinger. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hi.
I'm just going to give a brief introductory overview of both of you before we dive in. So both of you are singer-songwriters based in Nashville, Tennessee. Tim is an award-winning singer-songwriter and producer, a poet, a speaker, and a historian whose career spans over 20 years. His work has been featured on NPR, the Huffington Post, and Color Lines magazine. He has released 5 albums so far, all of which are wonderful. He also hosts a bi-weekly live series called Have You Heard?, which revisits lesser-known albums by artists from the worlds of gospel, soul, contemporary Christian, and women's music. And I have seen every episode so far, I think, and I have added artists to my Pandora list. So I'm grateful for that, Tim.
Thank you for watching.
Ray grew up in a singing family. His mother led praise and worship music in the Black church. Ray was only allowed to listen to gospel music growing up, which is very interesting, and I'm sure we'll hear about that. He naturally gravitated to the arts, as he describes it. He's a graphic artist. He's worked in development in nonprofit organizations. He has recorded 2 independent albums dedicated to love in all its forms. And Tim and Ray are also business partners at Imagination Fury Arts, a publishing and music imprint. And they just happen to be married to one another. Welcome both.
Thank you for having us and for doing this. I love what you're doing and the way that you're pursuing your art and shining light on other people. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, let's dive in and let's talk about music. So I'm curious, when did music find you, or did you find music, or was it kind of a mutual thing? Like, was there mutualism? How did all that happen for each of you?
Oh, well, he's wanting me to go first, I guess.
He's looking at you.
Well, I mean, as you said, I think it was totally just kind of predestined, I guess, for me. Everybody in my family sang. I grew up listening to my mother and my sister and my brother singing in the church, singing around the house, learning how to sing harmony from my family members, and my aunt is a singer-songwriter. And so all of it was just kind of like, of course, this is going to be a part of who you are. It's just, what does that mean for you? So yeah, that was just natural. What about you? I think for you, it was a different kind of thing. It was. I mean, I actually brought this because I heard this on the floor. This was one of the first albums. This was the album that changed my life at 4. And
4 years old.
4 years old. Prodigal According to Reba by Reba Rambo. And I heard this record and I knew what I wanted to do. I knew what I had to do. And so and music was my language. I mean, it's my earliest memories are of music.
That's incredible. You don't hear many people having that level of understanding about what was calling to them at that young of an age. It's almost like, Reba was your conduit, obviously, and it was just looking for you, and there you were. It knew you were out there. I love that. I love that. Religion and spirituality they were early influencers, right? I mean, they wound up becoming early influencers in both of your lives. So I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about just, and I know that's a very broad, religion and spirituality, it's big, but just at its core in terms of how it influenced both your lives as artists. And I know that you're artists in multiple ways, not beyond music, but could you just tell us a little bit about how that influenced you through the years?
Let's switch. So you start. All right. Well, I don't want to speak for him, but we both grew up, in Christian homes. I was a preacher's kid. My grandfather was a pastor. My mother was the church musician and a minister herself as well. And so it was pretty rigid. Like we were those they were uh, those evangelicals. They
Sure.
know that we went to Jimmy Swaggart's for summer vacation, and it was very
Yep.
rigid. We went to PTL. We went to PTL, and that was summer vacation, and
Yep.
so those were the staples. Christian television, Christian music. Um, and there was something, though, in the music that I was drawn to, even within that world, that the music I was drawn to was more progressive and
Mm.
was more liberatory, predominantly women, women artists, gospel music, Andre Crouch and the Disciples, Reba. They were a bit left of center. And
Mm.
so in particularly Reba's music, I heard a different kind of spirituality, a God that I liked. I didn't like the God of my grandparents at all. And so having that contrast, even within that world, really shaped how I viewed what I was hearing and experiencing. And that was, it's been my, exorcism for 44 years, is working that out
Mm.
for myself, both
Mm.
in my art and in my life. Like, what is my true spirituality?
Yeah.
I don't know if I answered your question, but no, and I think you're definitely onto something. I feel like my upbringing was less rigid. There were, and yet rigid in different ways. Like I was not allowed to listen to anything with gospel music. We didn't have cable in the house growing up. I was probably one of the only kids that I remember in elementary and grade school that still had the rabbit ears on the TV to get
Mhm.
channels you could get that way. And we didn't have internet in the house until it became something that I needed for school. And looking back on it, knowing what popular music was doing in the 90s and the 2000s, and hip hop becoming such a big thing, I see the standpoint of why my parents weren't wanting things like MTV in the house, certain music videos, certain images, certain notions of what being in the world, how that might be impressionable for a young Black kid, just trying to figure out his identity and maybe taking in those messages without any context and, taking that in. But I think for me, I was also seeking, and I was trying to find music that was well crafted, just beyond the messages of the music, trying to find orchestration and production and really wanting to analyze the music in that way. And so that led me to the confines of what was happening in gospel music, people like Richard Smallwood, who was incredibly orchestral, but also people who were more progressive and, we talk about crossover gospel artists that were appealing to a more mainstream or secular market. And so those were the artists that I was also looking towards, the artists that were doing contemporary gospel music, people like Tone and people like Dietrich Haddon. And so like wanting to expand my palette a little bit and find ways to relate to the music that was happening of the day, but with Jesus lyrics. Then expanding beyond that, because there were confines in that. And so wanting to find artists that I knew were influences on other artists. So finding people like Stevie Wonder and people like Michael Jackson, and doing that kind of in sly ways, because I knew that was music that my parents were listening to before they had gotten saved and became more staunchly, maybe dogmatic in their religion. And so I felt like, well, if I could, kind of ease in and see what they liked about the music. But in all of that, I mean, even with Stevie Wonder, there's so much spirituality weaved into his lyricism. And so wanting to make music eventually, realizing this was something I was supposed to be doing, make music that was life-giving, and seeing, what I've gotten from gospel as that foundation, but also seeking that in artists even outside of the gospel realm.
That's great. Tim, you said, what is my spirituality? that's such a great question, I think, for so many of us. And
Yeah.
I don't know that it ever gets answered while we're in this, like while we're alive. I don't think we ever really answer that question. I think it's all right. I mean, at least for me, that's how I think about it.
Well, you know, the gift of growing up in a fundamentalist home was that it made my motto, "I'll never be fundamentalist about anything." And so it does evolve, like our spirituality shifts and, you know, our beliefs should change as time goes on. We should look back and, you know, I mean, I was thinking it today. I was watching some old gospel videos from my teen years of, you know, coming to Nashville as a teenager and going to gospel explosions and and you know, remembering some of the things that I did not do when I was at those functions because I thought it was worldly, you
Sure.
know, and out of fear. I was more afraid than actually believing it was worldly, but I was afraid. And so we should be able to look back on those things and
Yeah.
say, God, I wish I'd done that.
Yes.
Or I wish I had allowed myself to experience that or know that. And, you know, and it's not in a regretful way, but it is to say, like, we can reflect and wish that we had thought differently because we know differently now,
Right.
you know.
Absolutely. I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness.
That's right.
And that's a very fundamentalist religion, very strict adherence to a particular interpretation of, well, the books we call the Bible.
Yeah.
And so I know I can relate to what you're saying. There were plenty of, and I was the firstborn in our family, so there were plenty of things that I wasn't allowed to do, or even join the Girl Scouts because it was considered worldly. So it's you look back on that, and I know I agree with you, Tim. It's not with regret; it's with curiosity and a bit of just intrigue. That okay, so that's what it was, and here I am today, and how much I've learned and grown through the years.
Well, it's part of you, and you talk about this a lot, our curiosity. And that's, you know, one of the things I think that the limitations, for those of us that woke up or that are waking, continuing to wake up, like our curiosity stays very alive. So, you know, I've spent a lot of time in this incarnation going back to experience, to watch and listen to things I was not allowed to back then.
Mhm.
You know, yeah, I mean, that's been a thing for both of us. And that's totally, I mean, I remember watching when I first moved to Nashville, the first thing I did, I was 24 years old, if you can even imagine. I went to Blockbuster and rented The Last Temptation of Christ because it was the thing you were going to get crucified for even, you know, looking for. And I said, I must see it. I must
see it.
I'm here. I'm on my own now, completely, you know, completely separated from everything I knew. I'm going to watch it. And I thought, what a great imagining of this story, you know? And so, and then not knowing years later, I would find The Passion of Mary Magdalene by Elizabeth Cunningham.
Yeah.
That, you know, also is a reimagining of that story that completely shifted me.
Yes.
Changed my life. And so that's, to me, that's spirituality, is being able to not need it to be a particular thing. I understand a book says a particular thing and we want to make it law, but it doesn't have to be law.
And so much of it is an imagining to begin with.
Yes.
And I think the movie The Life of Pi really puts that in perspective. If it's brilliant in the way that it really helps all of us understand how you can go through, and let's face it, life was really tough, really, really harsh and difficult. We think life is difficult today, and for many of us it is in a whole bunch of different ways. But, you know, back in the day, at the ancient early humans, it was really, really, really difficult. And you find all sorts of ways to deal with difficulty.
That's right.
And out of that, I think our own divinity kind of flows through, and then we have all these wonderful ideas, and then sometimes people take those ideas and then they create. I'm curious because you both have expressed this background that you had, your experience, and then both of you are gay, and here you are in the midst, very much enmeshed and immersed in these fundamental worlds.
Yeah.
And not only are you understanding that you're gay, but you're also understanding that you're creative, and like that's just a lot going on there that has to gel or that has to be explored.
I mean, I think that that's an important, for me, that was a process that started at 4 or 5. I mean, that was one of the things I knew about myself that far back. I mean, I really, when I look back on, of course, you don't, as you're a child, so you don't have words and you don't know how to articulate that. And then in our environment, there's no one you can really articulate that to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had the real gift at 16 of having a sister friend who, emancipated herself from her father and had a whole, another life as basically a 16-year-old with an apartment and living on her own. And she said to me, "Are you gay?" And she said it out loud, and it scared the poop out of me. I mean, to have someone see it, and to speak it. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to do, but she gave me space in a world I did not have space to say that anywhere else. And so just being able to have that little tiny sliver of space where I could talk about it and with her and articulate it and express what I was looking for and what I wanted and if I could have it. I mean, it changed my life because once it's one thing to carry a secret. You keep it inside and nobody knows it but you, and you might drive yourself crazy doing that. But then once you say it, it does take on a life and it becomes real.
Yes. And others witness it. Right. Yes. Yes.
You move past the barrier of I can never say it. So now I've said it.
Yeah.
And the reality is, can I allow myself to take the next step? And then you take that next little step. And then and so it's a becoming.
It's a becoming. That's exactly, it's an emerging of who we really are. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anything that you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what was unique about it for me, but maybe not so unique for most, I guess for me, I wasn't even so bogged down about what other people would think or, feeling like I'd be ridiculed or ostracized from people. I was so thinking about, because I was very ardent in my spirituality, and here goes Rob.
Welcome into the conversation. They have something to say about this.
Dude, don't be ardent. But I was, and I was I was really trying to reconcile it for me spiritually.
Yes.
Spiritually, and not wanting to disappoint my parents. I think that was a huge piece of it too. This idea that they have raised me, they shielded me from all these things that are apparently bad to, keep me pure and keep me morally good. And here's a piece of me that I'm not figuring out how to relinquish that might stain that notion.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think I had a few saving graces. One was I had an older brother who's also gay, and just a beautiful advocate and friend. And so he was kind of leading the way for me in his own way, and unbeknownst to him, because I wasn't talking about this with anybody. I also, in the same way that you had, the fundamentalism, and therefore I'm not going to be fundamentalist about anything. For me, it was, I got don't question God. And so I flipped that and was questioning everything and all things.
Yeah.
And I also was always trying to bring worlds together. And so being a kid that was interested in math and science, and then also had, this spiritual religious piece of me, and then had this artsy piece of me, I was always trying to pull those things together into one thing. And I remember there was a moment with I think it must have been biology, and we got to that topic, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
human evolution.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember going into that in high school, knowing they're not going to change my mind with their evolution stuff. I hear about this in church all the time, that they're going to try to push this on me, and I'm going to resist. And lo and behold, they showed a video that featured scientists who happen
Science. Yeah.
Christians.
Yeah.
What?
Science.
Who believe in evolution? What? And I went, how do you do both? And started researching and finding it doesn't have to always be either or. You don't have to be, this thing and then that makes you not that thing. And so things like that were all coming together to show me there's a way. There is a mindset, a mentality that you can hold for yourself, find for yourself, and adopt for yourself if it resonates with you. And that was my pathway out.
That's great. That's a really great segue into my next question, actually, which is, I'm wondering what you think. Do you think there's space for a newly imagined kind of spiritual music? And I know you've been living this your adult lives. Tim, you started when you were 4.
Wow.
But how do you see that? How do you see that happening?
I mean, I feel I have challenges seeing it, and the only way that I can see it is make it.
Yeah.
But I'm doing it because I feel like there has to be. I don't know that it's necessarily a question of can it be. I feel like it has to be, because I feel like the way music has become so capitalist, so late stage capitalist, that we're talking about like AI and holograms doing tours, when that is seen as something that is living up with the artists that we love, the icons that we've had, that have really been human, almost superhuman examples of how to be a music maker in the world. And now we've got this just hyper consumptive thing happening. And then you've got, gospel and CCM, the state that they're in now, which is, we're kind of in dire straits, just in terms of originality, creativity, interest in something more. I think it's all coming to a boiling point, or a tipping point, where we have got to figure out how to weave some notion of spirituality back into music. And I'm hoping that the conversations, because me wanting to connect all these things together, that the conversations that we're having around political movement, around racial injustice, around environmental justice, all these things are hopefully leading us to remember how we can bring these things together. Thoughts?
Well, yeah, I think for me, the greatest spiritual music that I've encountered that does lead the way, the majority of it, I would say, was women's music, or is women's music, because I had, again, the benefit of growing up with some really progressive contemporary Christian and gospel music. Wonderful, changed my life, got me to a particular point. But then it was like, well, I need something that also reflects what I've come to understand about politics, what I've come to understand about identity. And I found women's music a decade ago. And so that's become the added piece for me, that when I think about creating today, I'm looking at that and going, they did it all.
Yeah.
They
Interesting.
spirituality and feminism and identity, and theory. It's a complex music that's so accessible and not that unrelated to contemporary Christian music. So to me, I'm like, in the stew, listening to that, going, okay, so let's put this together. How do we put this together? And that's, where I'm at. I haven't finished anything yet, but I'm marinating and I'm thinking about that. And,
But I think it could be that because it was all about making sure there was space for everyone and not
Yes.
needing people to be the cookie cutters, not needing people to
Yes.
be holograms because, oh, this sold this number of units, so we have to pump out 5 more just like it. They each were
Yeah.
bringing a completely different kind of thing, their own experiences, their own styles, their own
right.
interpretations of what feminism was for them, being a woman was for them, being a lesbian for many of them was for them.
Yeah.
And so you get a breadth
Yeah.
of experience.
Well, and regional. I mean, you also
And
have, you know,
Mm.
think about Teresa Trull bringing her southernness and her gospelness to the table. And I think about Linda Tillery bringing her rock and gospel and soul influences together and through a feminist lens. And, you know, it really was, everyone was at the table to the best of their ability. You
Yeah.
know, and so that's where I think we have to go now. I think you know, as a culture, I think we're really attached to our identity politics, which is fine.
And important, especially for early stages of coming to
Absolutely.
terms with who we are and reconciling our material world, our material circumstances with, but wait, it doesn't have to be this way. And wait,
Right.
I need to remember what I come from, my history, my, you know. So yeah,
Right.
And the spiritual component is what needs to be fused with it.
yes.
Yes.
That's really what we're lacking. I
Yeah.
think we're so disconnected from our spirits.
It's so true. And I wonder if you think that some of the music that came out of the 60s, you know, I think of Carole King, and I know there are so many others, but I mean, really when they were making music that had a social justice thread, I mean, really, isn't that spirituality at its core?
The ultimate.
Is social justice. I mean, however somebody might think about God or the universe or a higher power, I mean, isn't it all about social justice and finding our shared humanity? It's like yeah.
That was
Well,
always oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I think for many people, what really did confuse that was there were many wonderful things about the Jesus movement in the 70s and what it brought, because a lot of that is how rock and roll found its way into Christian music. But what became a problem was that everyone decided that God was not a God of social justice. They wanted God to be their boyfriend.
Right.
So
So true.
So we went from
yeah.
understanding Jesus as a social justice worker to understanding Jesus as someone from a Harlequin romance. And so, you know, and because we aren't nuanced, that became the only Jesus then. Jesus as the boyfriend and the dominating boyfriend at that.
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got to really revisit, like we said at the top of the conversation, like, what is my spirituality?
Yeah.
What do I believe?
Yeah. So true. I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about just your process. We know we've touched on this already with some of the other parts of the conversation, but for both of you individually, how you work, your process, how you make art, you know, how it happens.
I've run my mouth a lot. Go ahead.
Well, this is a tough question because
It is. It's
both of us, we entered a real hibernation period with specifically music and being music makers. And so, you know, turning that back on within ourselves, this last year, I guess, and really, you know, at the top of this year, really being able to hone in on it for myself, I've had to learn it all over again, all over again.
Wow.
But what I found isn't different about what it was, you know, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, is that it always has to start organically. For some reason, I hear something just kind of pops up. And I know it's something that I need to either remember or record. And usually these days, it's really remember. It's really just, yeah, this is the seed of something. Let me hold on to
You
that.
hear it in your head, Ray? Is it? Yeah.
And a lot of times it's really just a melody or the beginnings of a song start. If it's really really got something on it, then it's got, maybe the beginnings of subject matter or something like
Mm,
that. Really just marinating on that, and the process is isolated. It is meditative. It is being quiet and figuring out what it's supposed to be. I mean, I'm in the middle of writing a song right now that I've been holding on to for years. Just kind of a notion of, is this about, um, it keeps coming back like something special, something special. So is it me that has something special to offer someone else? Is it someone else that has something special to offer me? And I've been like wrestling with it. What is it supposed to be? What is? And I can't let myself be content with. I even started the lyric, and it's like, yeah. And it clicked last week that it's not about this back and forth, me or you or me. It's you need to share the something special with you. And so
mhm.
now I'm needing to like completely go into a different notion. And so that's really how the process works. It's listening to what the song is supposed to be and moving with it.
Yeah.
What about
Yeah.
My process is different every time. And
Awesome.
so I never have it figured out. I've been, I'm on a bit of a dry right now, which really means I'm just fueling.
Yep.
So I take myself every time I sit down to write a record. One thing that is consistent is study. And so I take myself through wherever I'm guided to read about. And so, right now I'm reading memoirs of fashion editors.
Hmm.
And I landed there for some strange reason, but there's incredible messages. Andre Leon Talley's memoir and Grace Coddington, Diana Vreeland.
Mhm.
That's where I've been. I've just been living in people that developed a personal style. And what influenced that? Like, what made someone decide to work in fashion? And,
Yeah.
you know, what's their process? And it's deeply spiritual. And I didn't expect that.
Mhm.
And so, we show up, do we work, get surprised, and then somehow at the end of this, it will become something. I don't know what. I don't know
Yeah.
what I'll write, but that's where I'm, at the current moment, that's my process. But songs come to me lyric first.
Yeah.
I
And I'm the
rarely,
total opposite.
yeah, I rarely get music. Uh,
Mm.
it's usually a word, words or a series of words, or I'll know a concept that I want to write about. Um, but beyond that, I really don't ever know what's going to happen or how long it's going to take. I've got some songs I've been fiddling with for 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it. I
And
get
I
it.
will add, study is very important for me as well. And definitely with books and with, just taking in the written word and understanding. I'm finding myself kind of leaning more so towards fiction these days because I'm really enjoying the art of storytelling in that kind of way. Not that there's
Mhm.
not storytelling in nonfiction too, but really just kind of exploring characters and, what that means and how that might inform my music, but also studying the rich history of music. I think in music journalism and music appreciation, I feel like popular music appreciation, especially, we kind of tend to only go like maybe 20 years back, maybe 30 years back, depending on where we are in time. And I just feel like that lops off, especially for, millennials, people in my generation.
Yeah.
You don't, you miss so much good. And
Right.
so when I was in high school, one of the first eras of music I like, whoa, that was a thing. Let me dig into that. Was music of the Flower Power era, music of the late 60s, early 70s, and discovering artists like the Mamas and the Papas and
Mhm.
what the Beach Boys were doing then even
Yeah.
was a little psychedelic and fun. And the Temptations were entering that kind of phase, and everybody's hair was getting longer and the whole hippie kind of outfit. You see, I've got, my tank and my locks. So, that's what I kind of absorbed from that whole piece of it. But, I just think there's so much that we can glean from eras that we weren't necessarily a part of, or maybe we were.
Right.
It's so true. And we are, I think society, our sort of modern world tends not to want to look back very often. And there's so much we can learn about the world that came before us, those who came before us, but we always learn something about ourselves by understanding, by having a glimpse of history. We don't have enough of that. It's always, well, we know. Tim, was there anything else you wanted to add there before we move on?
I'm
Okay.
good.
I was going to, I mean, Tim, you have 5 albums out, and I'm wondering how, if you have a thought about how your music, because you put music out there, and Ray, you have put music out there too. So this is a question for both of you. How do you think the world has interacted with your music? Like, how does an artist have a sense of that? And what is your sense of that?
Well, my first 2 albums really were the ones that seemed to connect in the broadest way. And they were, my little baby attempts at speaking my truth, and so I look at it now and I really don't ever want to sing those songs again. Okay? But it is amazing to me to still get feedback, to get messages, to get the monthly reports and see where this music is still streaming, that people are still finding it, that it resonates. I mean, it still deeply resonates with the people that know it. And that's significant to me. I mean, I think we all, maybe all artists, really are harsh with ourselves, when we look back at our work. But, the reward is that people find it, and people find it for where they are.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, they're meant to find it. They're meant to find it in that moment in their lives. Yeah.
when you put it out there, it's not yours anymore.
Right.
And it becomes something to the listener that you can't control. And I used to get really upset when people misunderstood songs and go, that's not what I was saying. That's not what I meant. And then I just went, shut up. Like, shut up and take the quarter of a penny royalty for the stream. And, let it mean what it just, like, work has come to mean things to me.
Yeah.
And so you just have to let it live. And it's a gift. It's a gift. People liked love songs, and I wrote universal love songs. I always wrote genderless love songs. That was intentional. And so the people that interact with it are largely women, gay men. I mean, it's been the bulk of my audience. Church people. Church people loved. I mean, it was like the little worldly thing they could let themselves have were, my R&B records. And, our shows, when I did shows a lot, that's who was there. It was church people, and they knew that they were going to have a spiritual and fun time. We were, be a little sacrilegious and yet also be in the spirit all at the same time.
Right.
And so I think that I've maintained that connection with the people that continue to follow me through the years.
That's beautiful.
And for me, I mean, my works were done so selfishly. I was not even thinking a lot about how other people would find it, or even thinking like, what should I do to try to get other people to find it? It just was not even on my radar. The focus was so much about using the opportunity to be in the studio, to craft the music, to learn about me, and to reflect my understanding of how the world should be or could be as I saw it then.
Sure.
And so with that, thankfully, some people have found the music, and same thing. I mean, they really gravitate towards the love songs. I really worked very, very hard to craft the kinds of love songs that I hoped could be as devoid of dysfunction that we often get in love songs, that
Yeah.
I don't even know how to eat. I can't even, whatever, just the
I've lost myself.
view of what love could be. And I really wanted to try to remove it and say, actually, it's a really healthy spiritual way to tackle and understand these concepts of love. And, thankfully, the people that have found the music get that, and they get that there is something special in some of those songs. And so, with what I'm working on now, I actually am thinking much more communally, much more about how can this music work to find people who need this kind of messaging and this kind of music today. So we shall see what the impact of it'll be, and how that'll also inform what people make of what they find from the previous records as they discover my art.
Yeah. And Tim, with your show, your lives that you do, you talked a little bit about it. I mean, you are revealing and exposing lesser known artists.
Mm-hmm.
And which I think is really wonderful, and it kind of harkens back to what we were just talking about not being afraid to look back and just seeing what we can learn, not only from a music perspective, an art perspective, but just a human perspective. What were those lyrics? What were they singing about?
Right.
These beautiful shows that you do, is it influencing you, or is it impacting you as a musician, as an artist? What are you taking away?
Well, I think, the main thing I wanted to do was point back. And I feel like, Ray made a comment when we first started working together, 7 years ago.
Yeah.
One of the things he said to me was that my liner notes were like history books. And that they're, because I always made references to the past and to artists. And so I feel like the show is just an extension of that, of continuing to, and I had artists that modeled that for me. The main one who did that was Tina Marie. She always, there were so many things in her jackets of her album that she would dedicate songs to artists. She had poems, that she put in, that she wrote, that also pointed you to artists. And she was really, just such a great teacher to me in that way. And if I had not ever heard Tina Marie, I would have heard Ntozake Shange, who transformed my life with her writing and her poetry. And so I wanted to extend that through having these conversations with other creators. And sometimes they're the actual creator of the work themselves.
Yeah.
Sometimes they just love that particular album too.
Yeah.
And I wanted to create a specialized conversation about what these albums mean to us and why they matter. And so I think everything I do is to point people back, because I'm not that original, and none of us are. We can have wonderful thoughts, but we glean our thoughts from a montage we're montages, we're collages.
It's a great way to express it. Yeah, so
we're
true.
Quilts, we're quilts. Yeah. And so to be able to say, this is the part of my quilt I got from this person, and this is what they meant to me. This is what their work meant to me. That's, to me, the ultimate. I love that more than making a record of my own. I really do.
And there's such we talked about like life moving too fast and things just kind of spiraling and spinning too far forward. And I think with that happening, there's a lot of lessons that get missed. And so what I so appreciate is that you're oftentimes mostly highlighting records that are out of print or that have been out of print for a really long time. And you're saying, like, we missed that lesson. Let's go back and get that one. Let's that and pick that one back up. So yeah.
We talked a little bit about what you're both working on right now. You're in some ways in the gestation period. You mentioned sort of just listening, becoming. Is there anything else you want to say about what it is that's coming, that you think is coming next for each one of you?
Well, I think it's unexpected. Musically, I don't know that it's so related to what I've done in the past. And so it, of course, is connected, because everything's connected. But I feel like, I'll be 45 next month.
You're young.
And I don't feel, I've always felt more like a musical sojourner. And so it's been more like a crash course of sense through styles and genres. And so I think I'm moving in a direction that's more dance oriented than something I've done in anything I've done in the past. And part of that is, I think, the gospel connection to disco and house music. And so I see an easy way to fuse that spirit in the sounds with the sounds that I love. And so I think that's where I'm heading. I don't know what the content is going to be yet, but I do know that musically that's where my ear is. And that's what I'm looking at.
Wonderful.
I think for me, it's actually the reverse, because I did a lot of dance-oriented pop music, especially on the first album. But no, both of them were pretty dancey. And I'm wanting to really use whatever I'm working on next. And yeah, I don't know if it's eventually going to be, form an actual album. I feel like these days, it's really kind of dicey what that looks like today with streaming and everything. But the collections of songs that I'm putting together are definitely more rooted in the music that I grew up with, that contemporary R&B gospel thing. And I'm allowing myself, we talked about, the coming to terms and, identity politics and understanding who we were and how that related to our spirituality. And, in that process, there was a long stretch of time where I didn't want to think about gospel music. I didn't want to think about, I think I never really stopped identifying with a notion of Christianity. But I didn't want to be connected with those people because everything I saw was so, just rooted in dogmatism and, something that just seemed not the notion of Christ that I wanted to walk out. And, these few years of becoming more me, becoming into more of me, I've realized, what, that piece of me doesn't have to go away. Yeah. I get to still have a spirituality. I get to still want to share a gospel. And so I'm allowing myself to go there again, which feels very refreshing and really, really right, especially for the times.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's so powerful because I think that it's easy to throw our hands up in the air and say, God, notions of God, whatever word you want to use, Jesus, whatever word, I often feel like those concepts have been hijacked. And so it's binary. It's you're with us or you're not, and there's just no room for nuance or imagining or even bothering to look back at our history. Look at the history of religion to even understand what else might be possible, all the beauty that's been left behind. And so I think it's really powerful to be able to, both of you, you didn't just walk away from that part of your life. You are continuing to fuse it and integrate it into what comes next. And I think that's really powerful.
Well, I realized, and when I went back to school, 5 years ago now, 6 years ago, I guess, to finish my undergraduate degree. And in doing that, I really recognized, because all of my thesis work was around gospel music and contemporary Christian music. And I realized in doing that I had walked away with my tail between my legs. When I came out and had a really rough coming out experience, I did my best to still hold on to it, but that there was a piece of it I didn't feel I had ownership of. And
the gatekeeping. The gatekeeping keeps you from feeling like you can do anything within that.
And I realized that it's my history too.
Yeah.
It's my story too. And,
yes.
I really want to point people Just Above My Head by James Baldwin. What he owned in this book. He really owned his connection, which he did throughout his work. But this story in particular about, a gay gospel singer on the road during the civil rights movement, really, really says to any of us from that world who are different that it's your story too.
Yes.
And there's a different way to work with it and outside of it all at the same time. And so I think, the ownership piece became really clear to me while I was in school. And so in coming back to Nashville, it was, we are gatekeepers in our own right.
Yeah.
And so there's certain, there's
Mhm.
certain things that are important to me that survive from that world. And I'm doing what I can to help that live again
Yes.
in the ways that I can. And that's
Yeah.
my contribution because nobody else is interested in doing it. And so, it's a different buy-in than waiting, asking, will you please accept me? Will you please affirm who I am? Versus saying, no, this is mine.
Yep. This is
This is
right.
mine. You don't get it.
My
And
story.
I'm going to make sure it lives. It's a different spin.
It's great. It's great. So necessary, so powerful. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Is there anything that, before we go into the lightning round of fun questions, is there anything else that you would like to just add to tonight's conversation?
I feel like we've said a lot.
Yeah.
No, this has been brilliant. This is I'm so grateful. This has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you both.
Thank you, Deb, for making the space.
All right, so we're ready for the fun questions?
We are.
Wow.
All right. What makes you awestruck? What makes you say, wow?
I had to think about this one. And I think what really, we use this phrase a lot. They saw me and I felt seen. But there really is something, every collaborator that I've had with music who's ever just gotten it and wanted to work with me, that has been just like a wow.
Yeah.
Seen. We can do this. So those are definitely my wow moments.
Voices.
Hmm.
The way a singer approaches a song that just goes right there.
Yeah.
And you get the bumps and tears and the ugly face. And, those voices leave me awestruck.
It's beautiful. Beautiful. What is the kindest thing someone has ever done for you?
Actually, Deb, you are sort of related to this moment. Our dear friend Lynn, some years ago, I had a health crisis and was in the hospital. And when I got out of the hospital, Lynn organized a night with two of my friends from the city and my neighbors in my community, and got everybody in my bedroom because I could not leave the house.
I remember when she did that. Yep.
And filled the room with candles and food. And it's one of the greatest nights of my life.
Wow.
And it was it's probably people have done many kind things for me. So when I say that, it's really hard, but that's where my mind goes. So I go to that night. That was the greatest thing that's ever happened to me.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I think I'm going to have to say a couple weeks ago, actually, my mom shared my song, Honesty, from my last album, Backslider. She sent it to me in a text, just letting me know that she was listening to it. And she just said, wow, beautiful. And, she has gone through her own evolution with her, politics and understanding of God and how that works with spirituality with her own children. But just that kindness, again, of seeing it, getting it, validating it, and accepting it.
Yeah, beautiful. What is your favorite tree?
Magnolia tree.
Ooh, yes.
I'm gonna go with fir, actually.
Oh, okay.
Got a thing for evergreens.
Yes, very nice. What is your least favorite smell?
Go ahead.
Burned popcorn.
Ooh, yeah, I get it.
I hate it. I hate it. Go ahead.
No, okay. So I will preface this with this is nothing about notions of criminality, but I just do not like the smell of pot. Yeah, I just can't do it.
It's my second least favorite.
Understood. You know, we all have different olfactory senses. So.
Does not work for me.
Wow, this was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Deb.
Really appreciate it. So grateful to share this time with you. Please tell people where they can find you.
My handle on Instagram and Twitter is Tim Dillinger, and you can find my music on Facebook, Tim Dillinger Music. Those are the best places to find me.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm Ray Curenton everywhere: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. RayCurenton.bandcamp.com if you want to find the music and support me and not give me a what'd you say, a fraction of a penny.
That's right.
Through streams, you can
That's right.
actually buy the record, and I'll actually get a really nice chunk of the proceeds if you go through Bandcamp.
That's right. Both of my albums are on Bandcamp as well.
Fabulous. Everybody go to Bandcamp, please. That's the best way to purchase this.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you again. I'm just really so grateful. This was as meaningful. It's beyond what I thought it would be. So thank you.
Thank you. Always a joy to be with you. We're so proud of you. Get some Deb Ondo art.
Yes.
We're all just out there trying to tell our stories and put our voices in the world in different ways. That's really what it means to be a human being, I think. So
agreed.
I hope others will follow. All right, great. So I will be back in 2 weeks with author, poet, artist, and social activist Jan Phillips. That is sure to be another great conversation. Thank you all for joining, for watching. Remember, we need art of every kind. We need creative expression and imagination so we can see the world differently and overcome the status quo. Thank you.
Awesome.
Love you both.
Love you too, Deb.
Take care. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Really appreciate it.